On the day that should have been my daughter's happiest, I ended up blowing up her wedding in front of 200 people. And believe me, she earned it. Before I go on, hit subscribe, ring the bell because we drop new stories every day, leave a like, and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. My name is Robert Bob Miller. I'm 66, and I spent 4 decades building a company from nothing. I sold that business in 2019 for a life-changing amount, enough to retire comfortably. I truly thought I'd raised a daughter who understood the sacrifices behind all that. I was wrong. It started on March 15, 2024, when my only child, Sarah, 28, announced she was marrying Jason Reed, a 30-year-old systems analyst I'd met briefly twice. From the start, something about them rubbed me the wrong way. But as her dad, I chose to support her. I didn't realize I was walking into the biggest humiliation of my life. Sarah had always been spoiled. I own that. After my divorce from Karen in 2018, I tried to make up for the lack of a mother's presence with money. I bought her a condo in downtown Chicago, gave her $1,500 a month for expenses, and funded her supposed business degree, anything to give her the life I never had. But once she met Jason's mom, Linda Reed, everything changed. Linda, 58, looked like money and moved like it, and she slid right into the classy mentor role Sarah thought she needed. "Dad, Linda has such impeccable style," Sarah would gush. "She gets what real elegance is." At first, it sounded harmless. Then, it turned into steady comparisons. During wedding prep, nothing happened without Linda's say-so. The dress, the flowers, the menu, the music. Her approval mattered more than mine. I was footing the $38,000 bill, but my opinions stopped counting. "Dad," Sarah would say with a sigh, "Linda says white roses are more refined than the ones you suggested. She's planned weddings way more sophisticated than this." Every comment felt like a tiny blade I swallowed in silence, telling myself it'd be worth it on the big day. What really hurt was watching Sarah lose basic respect for me. The little girl who once ran to me after nightmares now treated me like a social liability. Linda had done what I thought was impossible. She'd turned my daughter against me. A week before the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, I overheard Sarah tell her friends, "Thank goodness for Linda. My dad doesn't get any of this. He's simple." Simple. That word echoed in my head for days. On the wedding day, September 22, 2024, I woke up early, nervous and excited. It was still my daughter's day. I hoped I'd finally be seen for the father I'd always been. I put on my best suit, the one I wore when I sold my company, and headed to the Drake Hotel in Chicago, the venue I'd paid for. During the church ceremony, Sarah looked radiant. Watching her walk down the aisle, I flashed back to the kid who used to play under my desk while I worked. I thought maybe after the ceremony, we'd find our way back to each other. The reception started perfectly. 200 guests enjoyed the menu I paid for, the music was bright, and every camera caught smiling faces. I kept to myself at my table, waiting for the thank you speeches when surely my daughter would publicly acknowledge what I'd done for her. Then, that moment came. Sarah took the microphone with a smile I thought was for me. This was it. She stepped into the center of the room, cameras flashing, guests grinning, the DJ lowering the volume as a hushed quiet fell. I straightened my tie, sat up, and braced my heart for the gratitude I'd waited months to hear. Sarah wore the most beautiful wedding dress I'd ever seen, $4,800, which I paid without blinking when she said it was the only one worthy of this ceremony. A French veil floated behind her as she reached the mic. For a second, I saw my 5-year-old on my shoulders, reaching for the stars. "Dear family and friends," Sarah began, voice clear and bright, "this is the most important day of my life, and I want to thank the people who made it possible for Jason and me to be here celebrating our love." Her smile lit up the room and my chest swelled with pride. Guests applauded. I glanced at my brothers, John and Mike, who smiled back, knowing how proud I felt despite our recent clashes. Every dad deserves this moment, John had told me over breakfast. First, Sarah said, I want to thank my husband, Jason, for choosing me as his partner in life. You're the most wonderful man I've ever known. Jason smiled from the head table, moved. Then, Sarah turned to where Linda sat in a navy suit that probably cost more than most monthly paychecks in the room. But above all, Sarah continued, raising her voice just a touch, I want to thank the woman who truly guided me into this new phase of life, who taught me what real class and elegance mean, someone who actually understands what matters. My heart sped up. She said, woman, which felt odd, but I figured maybe she was building toward both parents. I readied myself to stand when she said my name. Linda Reed, Sarah announced, her voice ringing through the room. My wonderful mother-in-law is worth infinitely more than my own father. She's shown me what real emotional support looks like, unlike my dad, who only knows how to throw money at things and is completely useless at everything else. Time stopped. Her words hit me like an avalanche of ice. I felt the blood drain from my face. Useless. Had she really called me useless in front of 200 people who knew and respected me? The silence was funeral cold. Some guests traded confused looks, others stared at their plates, uncomfortable. I sat frozen, like I'd been punched in the gut. Sarah kept going. Linda's taught me that a person's true worth isn't about bank balances, but about cultural refinement and an instinct for social nuance. Things my father will never grasp, no matter how hard he tries, because he simply wasn't born for it. Linda smiled, basking, soaking up a few awkward claps from guests unsure how to react. She even rose with a little bow, like the star of the show. My brothers looked stricken, John holding his breath, Mike clenching his fists. Karen, my ex-wife, who'd kept things cordial for Sarah's sake, stared wide-eyed from her table, shocked by our daughter's behavior. So, Sarah finished with a dazzling smile, let's raise our glasses to Linda Reed, the woman who truly deserves to be called my mother, because she's been more of a mom in 2 years than my father has been in my whole life. Applause was thin and forced. Most guests clapped out of politeness, their faces said otherwise. Several of my relatives didn't lift their hands at all. The party vibe curdled into something tense and strange. I sat there, paralyzed by the humiliation. 40 years building a reputation, 40 years of earned respect, erased by my own daughter in under 5 minutes. Useless, pounded in my skull. Linda went to Sarah and hugged her theatrically, whispering something that made Sarah laugh. They seemed oblivious to the damage they'd done, like humiliating the bride's father was a normal part of any wedding. Something gave way inside me. It wasn't a snap. It was more like a rope finally fraying after too much strain. 4 decades in business had taught me that there are moments when you either stay a victim or you take control. I stood. The squeak of my chair on the marble floor sliced through the tension. Heads turned. Some expected me to bolt in shame. Others, especially my brothers, looked worried, bracing for a meltdown. But 4 decades of running a company burned one lesson into me. The biggest decisions are made in the hardest moments, and they're carried out cold. Never from emotion, always from reason. I walked toward Sarah, who still stood at the mic with Linda hugged against her like a real mother and daughter. My steps were steady, unhurried, certain. I'd made million-dollar calls with less clarity than I felt just then. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. Sarah, I said calmly, holding up my hand for the mic. My tone was so even it unsettled her. She'd expected shouting, tears, a soap opera scene. But I learned long ago that real power moves quietly. Linda frowned, annoyed. Bob, I think that's enough for tonight, she cooed, that syrupy voice she used to sound polite while talking down to me. Let the newlyweds enjoy their special moment. Oh, it is going to be special, I said, easing the mic from Sarah's hands as her confidence wavered. Very special for everyone here. Faces around the ballroom sharpened, some curious, some concerned. My cousin Alan, who'd managed my company's finances for years, gave me a look I knew well, the look he wore when I was about to take a risky, necessary step. I pulled my phone from my suit pocket, a newer iPhone where I kept my banking activity organized for the last 3 years. Sarah and Linda traded uneasy glances. They knew, as I knew, that when a business owner takes out his phone in the middle of something important, it's rarely to show family photos. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, using the same voice I'd use at board meetings. "Thank you for being here on this very revealing night, because you're about to witness something you'll remember." The quiet thickened. Jason's smile collapsed into a grimace. He took a step like he might intervene, then thought better of it. "My daughter just said something interesting," I went on conversationally. "She says Linda Reed is worth more than I am. She understands the value of things, and that I'm useless except for my money." Sarah opened her mouth to cut in, but I lifted my free hand, the way I did in meetings when someone spoke out of turn. "Please, let me finish, honey. You had your time." Linda shifted like she might slip away, but I stopped her with a look. "No, Linda, stay. This involves you." Something in my voice pinned her like a deer in headlights. "See," I told the guests, "after 40 years in business, I learned that information is power, and the best lessons are taught with facts, not pretty words." I unlocked my phone and opened my banking app. The numbers were all there, time-stamped, documented. Years of quiet payments I'd made as a father, never imagining they'd one day defend me. "Linda," I said, smiling without warmth, "would you explain to everyone how a woman as elegant as you, who, according to my daughter, knows the real value of things, has maintained such a refined lifestyle?" Her face blanched. The smug composure evaporated. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. "Oh, I think you do," I replied, still even. "In fact, I'm sure you remember our private conversations over the last 2 years." Sarah looked alarmed for the first time. She finally understood she'd misjudged her useless father. Jason stepped closer, his expression twisting as he started connecting dots he didn't want to connect. "Folks," I said, raising my voice a hair, "what you're about to hear may surprise you as much as it did me when I realized my own daughter preferred comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths." I glanced at my phone and confirmed the numbers I knew by heart. 43 bank transfers in 24 months, $18,000 total, all recorded, all legal, all verifiable. Sarah, Linda. My calm clashed with the room's tension. I hope you enjoyed your little theater, because it's my turn to tell the real story. With the ballroom still silent, I laid out the secret I'd kept. 2 years ago, I began, Linda Reed, the woman Sarah admires, was in serious financial trouble. Despite the flawless look and perfect polish, her accounts were bleeding red and debts piled up behind the scenes. She kept up appearances, jewelry, trend-forward outfits, but that facade cost money she didn't have. Head swiveled toward Linda. Her expression curdled into a mix of rage and panic. Her hands trembled. That told me the truth was landing. She won't like what she hears, but it's necessary if we're all going to understand what's actually been going on, I said, opening the transaction list on my phone. So I quietly paid her debts. Every month, $750 wired to her account to cover bills and keep up the image she needed for her social circle. In total, $18,000 in 2 years to prop up an illusion they kept feeding. A low ripple moved through the guests. Linda, it turned out, wasn't the self-made, financially secure woman many assumed. Some people traded looks, disbelief tinged with pity. Sarah lowered her eyes, suddenly speechless. For the first time, she seemed to see her surrogate mother clearly, fragility and fraud behind the shine. That's not all, I continued. I also used my contacts to get Jason the job he has now, because I believed it would help their future. Not a single real thank you for that. Linda tried to cut in. I waved it off. No need to deny anything, Linda. The transfers exist. Anyone can verify them later. Sarah fidgeted in her dress, all the gloat gone, replaced by nerves. The tidy little autobiography she'd written for herself was falling apart in public. And that's still not the worst of it, I added, pulling up other documents. Let's talk about something Sarah has hidden for years. The so-called business degree she bragged about, smoke and mirrors. I paid $12,000 for a program she attended, but she never finished and never earned a diploma. The university's records are clear. A wave of gasps and murmurs swept the room. Faces around the ballroom shifted from joy to shock. Mary, a close friend who works at that college, slapped a hand over her mouth. This perfect fairy tale, I said, rests on lies, right down to the inheritance Linda dangled in front of them. There are no millions. I met with attorneys who confirmed Linda mortgaged her home and other assets to cover debts. There's nothing to gift, only loans and promises. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut like she could blink it all away. Her carefully curated world was collapsing. Jason leaned into Linda, whispered something dark to her, then backed away from the stage, shaken and unsure. The air thickened with secrets, pain, and betrayal turned inside out. I don't regret helping financially, I said evenly. I did it to protect my daughter and our family, but I won't let lies keep wrecking what was real. I met Linda's gaze. Behind the anger was fear. She knew there was no dodging the paper trail or the consequences. This was a point of no return, a chapter closing so a new one could begin, one where painful truth might be the first step toward rebuilding or toward total collapse. I thought of all the nights I lay awake, wondering how my own daughter ended up cocooned in deceit. I felt grief and disappointment, but also steel. I would no longer be the silent target of a family that neither respected nor valued me. Guests looked at me with a mix of empathy and awe. A few relatives moved closer in quiet support. I wasn't alone. Some had always had my back, even if things with Sarah were different. Behind the glitter and glam, there had been a fragile glass world teetering on the edge. Now came the slow, painful work of rebuilding, with honesty and transparency, or not at all. I knew many doors would close, but others, better ones, might open for people brave enough to face the truth and choose a new path. The night had shifted for everyone, and for me, Robert Miller, it was the start of taking my story back, setting boundaries no matter the cost. Dignity and respect aren't bought. They're earned with actions and truths you can't bury. It was time to move. With my voice still echoing, I realized there were more truths the room needed to hear. Sarah's tears finally spilled. She grasped for words that wouldn't come. The story she'd built on appearances was cracking in front of her. I want to talk about something that might seem small to some of you, I said, scanning the room, but it cuts to the heart of honesty between a parent and a child. I pulled a sealed envelope from my bag, documents and emails that illustrated exactly what I was saying. Years ago, Sarah enrolled at a well-known Chicago college to earn a degree in business administration. She never finished, never met the requirements to graduate. I opened the envelope and showed pages, official records, emails with the school and professors. That 12,000er program? I paid it with the hope she'd build a solid future. She quit halfway without telling me the truth. The room sank into heavy silence. Faces showed disbelief and sadness. Mary, who works at the university, murmured, "I can't believe she hid it this long." Sarah sobbed now, regret on her face, but the cut was deep. "And that's just the tip of the iceberg," I said. The promise of a large inheritance, another mirage. Linda sold off or mortgaged nearly everything to chase her debts. That dream of easy money was smoke. What's left is liability that Sarah and Jason would have inherited. Sarah squeezed her eyes again like she could stop the free fall. Jason's face went ashen. The tidy castle was collapsing, threatening to bury everyone under it. "I'm not condemning Sarah," I said, "because I know she's been a victim of these lies too. But it's time for responsibility. The excuses end tonight." With that, I concluded, I'm setting clear boundaries. My dignity won't be trampled, and my efforts won't be dismissed. Truth is the only path to heal or to walk away. Whispers stirred. Some nodded, grasping the weight of it. Others looked at me with sorrow, as if watching a father lose a daughter he thought he knew. Sarah, shattered, leaned toward Linda, who now looked like a shadow refusing to face reality. As the reception unraveled around us, it was obvious. This was the moment everything changed. The air was so heavy it felt like the walls might buckle. Linda, who'd controlled the narrative for years, now looked small, nearly defeated. Her once confident face showed the strain of lies that had outgrown her control. Suddenly, she snapped, "I never should have trusted you, Bob." Her voice cracked across the ballroom like a gunshot. Gasps, murmurs. It wasn't just an accusation, it was an admission. Her world, built on poses and deception, was being driven out by the unvarnished truth. Sarah tried to apologize, but shame and panic stole her voice. Jason, who'd kept his distance, walked to her and whispered something that left her sobbing. Silence settled again, broken only by sniffles and stunned whispers. Guests began to slip out, unable to witness more public wreckage. Watching it all, I felt something bittersweet. Grief for what family I thought I had, relief that I didn't have to swallow one more lie. I walked to the table where I'd left my coat in a folder. Words weren't going to be enough. I pulled out the file, bank records, emails, messages, backing up every claim. "This isn't just talk," I said steady. "I have the proof. I'll share it with whoever needs to see it." Linda glared, cornered for the first time. The rope had slipped from her hands. The public fallout was only the beginning. A night that should have celebrated love had become a reckoning, tears and truth exposing what had festered underneath. I sat and watched the veil fall from Sarah's eyes as Jason quietly drifted away, making it plain the engagement was done. The night wouldn't end in a marriage, but in a break that split our lives into before and after. And though it felt like a finale, the truth unleashed would echo for a long time. Guests left in a daze, torn between compassion and disbelief. Linda's outburst was only the first spark. Behind it was a knotted web of complicity and silence beginning to unravel. I remembered how I'd kept the peace for years, ignoring small signs that now, in hindsight, were central puzzle pieces. This was the beginning of a long, painful process. Sarah stood there, broken, tears pouring. She'd lost something you can't easily get back. Jason kept his distance, disappointment and betrayal stamped on his face. The dynamics were shifting fast. The ceremony was over, but the conflict was not. I thought about how even strong families can be hollowed out by lies until there's a wall you can't climb. I had to stay firm, not just for me, but for those few who still trusted me. As the candles guttered, I knew this night would be remembered, not for promises made, but for truth finally spoken. The road back would be long and lonely, but I was ready to walk it. Linda, facing public exposure, had a hard road ahead, social pressure and legal consequences alike. Sarah had to learn a brutal lesson about trust and responsibility. Owning her choices would be the first step toward any dignity she could reclaim. As I gathered my things, I faced the uncertain future. My relationship with my daughter and her circle would never be the same. Distance, emotional and literal, was the only way to protect my peace. The night air through the open doors reminded me, endings make room for beginnings. I thought about the cost of silence and what grows in its shade. My story, however painful, could stand as a call to honesty and the courage to face the truth. I left the ballroom knowing I'd done the right thing. The masks were off. It was time to rebuild, personally and as a family, if that was even possible. I looked back once, some relatives still huddled, quietly tallying the social and emotional fallout. Walking to my car, I felt grief for what was gone, and a quiet steadiness from reclaiming my dignity. A new chapter had begun. Deliberate steps, firm decisions. There would be more battles, legal and personal, but I wasn't afraid. Truth was my shield. Justice was my aim. I left the noise behind, certain that hard as the road would be, I'd walk it with my head up, slowly regaining the respect I deserved. The next morning hit everyone like cold water. Guests buzzed about what they'd seen. News spread among family, friends, neighbors. A day meant for celebration had become a wedge. At breakfast, my brothers John and Mike offered support and concern. It was a lot, they said, but truth had to win. Their backing gave me strength to keep cleaning up the mess. Sarah shut down, refused contact, choosing silence over a reckoning she'd already lost. Her social image started cracking. Some guests reached out to me quietly. Apologies, encouragement, sympathy leaned my way. Meanwhile, things with Jason were untenable. The young analyst was confused and rethinking his future with Sarah. In private conversations, he sounded more distant, doubtful of the engagement. Legally, I got professional help. I hired a family and estate attorney. I had to protect what I'd built and make sure it wouldn't be misused. Among the documents were proof of resources used improperly, transfers and charges that burned through my patience and justified firm action. Those records would matter in the days ahead. In every meeting, I planned each move with care. No impulsive steps. Experience taught me patience, anticipating reactions, preparing counters. Day by day, I worked to secure my independence and my respect. The personal pain mixed with the need to stay focused. I leaned on trusted friends, people who steadied me and gave wise counsel. The loneliness was softened by those alliances. My relationship with Sarah dwindled to almost nothing. Attempts at contact were refused or ignored. Silence was her refuge and her punishment. Rebuilding looked dark and solitary, but I was determined to do it with dignity and clarity. This wasn't just a rupture, it was the start of a new era, truth and respect at the center. Each day the weight lifted a little, and hope for inner peace grew. It wouldn't be easy, but justice and self-respect would guide me. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions, choices, and consequences. Every call and message had to be measured in a battle that was now legal as much as personal. I had to blend my business instincts with the caution of a wounded father who still knew his own power. No more mistakes, no more wavering. The local press caught wind of the drama and began watching us. That added pressure, but it wouldn't slow me down. Linda, the hub of the deception, began to crack publicly. Her polished veneer showed fissures under scrutiny. I got calls from people close to her, floating quiet deals or ways to avoid further exposure. I was clear. Truth and justice aren't negotiable. Sarah, adjusting to her new reality, slowly started to grasp the cost of her choices, though humility didn't come quickly. Her defenses stayed up, making the distance between us ache more. On long, quiet afternoons, I reflected on how family ties rot when they're soaked in ego and disloyalty. I remembered happier times that fueled me to keep going. I reorganized my finances, protected remaining assets, and began investing in a small project that actually brought me joy. My resolve was absolute. I wasn't going backward. Day by day became an act of courage. The challenges were many, but purpose kept me moving. What began as a wedding story had become a declaration of principles, and each battle fought brought me closer to a deserved, authentic peace. One especially cold evening, sitting in my study surrounded by legal papers and letters, I knew it was time to close old chapters and open new ones. I couldn't live stuck in the past. I reached out to old friends, people who'd watched me fight, and with their advice, protected not just my money but my mental health. Those late-night talks reminded me I wasn't alone. In quiet moments, I reminded myself, this isn't about money or property. It's about respect, the kind a father and a man deserve when they've given everything to their family. The wounds would take time, but every step was toward a truer life. Time would put the puzzle pieces where they belonged. The rebuild would be slow, but hope grew with each day. The right to justice and respect burned like a flame I would protect. After weeks of analysis and counsel, I took decisive action. I announced the immediate cancellation of every quiet payment I'd been making. Lines had to be drawn. Dependence and abuse wouldn't continue. I told Sarah firmly that the condo she'd been living in, titled under my holdings, though effectively hers, would be listed within 30 days. It wasn't impulsive. It was a measured move to keep resources from being squandered. I also removed her name from accounts and documents where she was listed as a beneficiary. It hurt, but it was necessary to reset responsibility. I informed Sarah, my attorneys, and the bank so the process would be clean, legal, and tamper-proof. At the same time, I strengthened my professional and personal support net. I hired asset management experts and family mediation consultants to minimize damage and resolve conflicts where possible. Inside, it felt like closing a door for good. Sadness tangled with a strange relief. I was protecting myself and laying a new foundation. I restructured my finances, safe investments, real diversification. No loose ends. Constant communication with my legal team kept things tight and anticipated any trick. Contact with Sarah was nearly zero. Attempts at reconciliation were turned down or ignored. The distance hardened into something final. Painful, yes, but keeping my dignity mattered more than a bond broken by contempt. This also sent a message to anyone waiting for me to keep taking the hits quietly. The line was set. No going back. Days were a mix of nostalgia and hope, what might have been versus what could be now. This was when I stopped seeing myself as a victim and became the author of my story, setting firm boundaries to safeguard my autonomy and respect. I remembered every evasive call, every broken promise, every long silence that said more than 1,000 words. I spent days with experts, combing through contracts in every legal avenue to protect what I'd built. My lawyer warned me about potential drawn-out fights and delay tactics from Linda and Sarah. So prudence and strategy were non-negotiable. We prepared detailed documents and collected rock-solid proof. Selling the condo meant interviewing agents and reading the market for a quick, fair sale. I couldn't afford missteps or delays that would put the estate at risk. Banks were briefed to lock down accounts that could be misused. Every step was planned to avoid surprises and keep things transparent. Inside, sadness mixed with relief. Mixed. Drawing a line with my daughter hurt, but peace came from clear boundaries. I thought about family. Without respect and truth, any tie rots. Staying firm was an act of self-respect, a promise not to be underestimated or manipulated again. Even as the gap with Sarah widened, part of me hoped she'd someday understand the value of honesty and accountability. This phase, marked by resilience, taught me that self-respect is the foundation of any real relationship. It wasn't the end, just a hard beginning. Each small win in protecting my assets and enforcing boundaries felt like a quiet victory. The path wouldn't be smooth, but I was ready to walk it. The wounds would take time, but truth and respect lit the way. One night, watching the city lights from my window, I felt the full weight of how everything had changed. Grief for the family I'd imagined mixed with the conviction that I'd done the right thing. The legal process moved forward, many meetings, document prep. My lawyer kept reminding me to be firm and careful, avoid pointless confrontations that could be used against me. 2 old friends, one in finance, one in family conflict resolution, became pillars. With their help, I stayed calm and clear-headed. Slowly, I rebuilt my life. Personal projects, recovering emotional balance that had been on hold for years. Having firm, precise boundaries gave me a renewed sense of power and hope I hadn't felt in ages. Every step was an act of personal justice. Even knowing the road would be hard, I was determined to protect the dignity that's mine. The public breakup left a scar on all of us. Canceling the ceremony was just the first step in a path of silent standoffs, absences, and new family dynamics no one wanted but everyone had to accept. After the humiliation, Sarah chose not to face me or try to repair what was broken. Silence was her shield and her sentence. Jason made his own definitive choice. In a private family meeting, he said he couldn't go forward with a marriage built on lies. "I can't marry someone who lied to me about everything," he said, steady and clear. That ended the engagement, triggering shockwaves. The perfect image they'd sold to family and friends shattered. News of the split spread quickly. Those who stuck around after the blow-up spoke with sadness and surprise at how a beautiful wedding night collapsed so fast. Meanwhile, I focused on my legal and personal reset. The condo listing moved forward on schedule. The legal steps advanced smoothly. Things turned cold across the extended family. People who once gathered now avoided deeper conversations. Tension crackled in every call and visit. Sarah tried once to approach me and apologize, but my answers were firm. It was time for her to face the consequences of her choices without expecting me to clean up after her. My stance came from self-respect and the need for healthy boundaries. I wouldn't let the past repeat or the wounds stay open. I still hoped she'd learn to value honesty, work, and dignity, but I accepted that day might never come. Each silent day reinforced the truth. As painful as it was, this was the right path for my integrity and well-being. Life made room for new projects. I invested time and resources into a small venture I cared about, and it brought me genuine satisfaction and purpose. My circle backed me, recognizing that this wasn't just outward reconstruction. It was a deep reset of who I was and what mattered. Through it all, I learned the power of resilience and reinvention after hard blows. Peace comes when you own your choices and act with honesty and courage. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to meet it with the quiet confidence that comes from ending a toxic cycle. I won't forget those faces caught in the storm, but I carry the lesson that dignity and respect are treasures you never let anyone take. The days right after the official split were a flood of consequences. Sarah, without family support or her old safety net, started living a very different life. The condo sold as planned. The proceeds secured the estate and cleared debts. For Sarah, it meant losing a home and a symbol of stability. Without the financial cushion, she had to find her own way. Independence, something she'd never valued, became a sudden necessity. Her social circle shrank fast. Word of the lies in the public scene traveled. People drifted off. Jason, still processing, stepped away completely. The disappointment ran deep, and whatever wasn't resolved made one thing certain: their road together had ended. Linda vanished from public view. Her attempts to keep up appearances crumbled under financial and legal pressure. She withdrew to avoid bigger scenes. Sarah faced the loneliness and the consequences. Without the backing she'd once had, she took modest jobs, far from the comfort she had enjoyed. Having to stand on her own changed her perspective. She tried to reach me several times, looking for support or understanding, but I stayed firm. Distance was necessary for both of us to heal and for her to grow up. The grind and solitude became her companions, and, slowly, independence brought her a new kind of dignity. I moved on, projects that mattered, relationships built on truth and mutual respect. The experience taught me that even deep wounds can be doors to growth. Friends and family who recognized my integrity kept me steady. Despite the losses, I gained something priceless: peace. Looking ahead, I knew the sacrifices were the price of getting my autonomy and dignity back, and that the learning was for both of us, father and daughter. Recovery was slow but steady. Each hurdle cleared rebuilt my confidence and pointed to a truer life. Change hit Sarah hard. Comfort and luxury vanished, and with them her old world view. Without resources or a net, she met uncertainty and fight for everyday reality. She started in a modest restaurant job, no room for pretense. Humility, at last, became her ally. Old friends peeled off, gossip spread like wildfire. Linda slammed the door on her past, going quiet as questions about her finances grew. Still, Sarah began to reflect. In small conversations with the few who stuck around, she admitted there were hard roads ahead if she wanted her self-respect back. She tried to reach out to me. My answer didn't change: take responsibility and face the outcomes. Our silence and distance were the tools we needed to find our footing and heal. Meanwhile, I kept working on what was real. This stretch of solitude and self-knowledge, I knew, would make me stronger. Reflection and steady support helped me move forward, leaving the weight of the past where it belonged and opening new doors. Life had turned in a way I didn't expect. The challenges were many, but hope and dignity became the lights I followed. Each day reinforced the core lesson: truth, however painful, is the only way to freedom and peace. Over months, Sarah started to grasp her mistakes and reset her priorities. The road was long and rough, but each small step restored a bit of confidence. She started proving to herself she could stand on her own, this time with honesty and accountability, two things she'd avoided for years. I stayed focused on protecting what I'd built and guarding the dignity that had been trampled. Rebuilding my personal and emotional life became a project of renewal and hope. Even with the family wound still open, growth gave me a reason to keep going. Sometimes you have to lose to win back your life. Real strength, I learned, is born from truth and self-respect. I still hope Sarah finds the light to understand the value of truth and effort. Until then, I'll keep walking with the calm of someone who acted with integrity and courage. I've realized that distance between a parent and child can be brutal, but sometimes it's the only way to heal. I learned to value myself again, to understand that I don't give up my dignity for anyone, and that inner peace is the most precious thing you can own. Through all of this, I found the strength to begin again and to build relationships rooted in respect and truth. My days are now full of new experiences that remind me that even when life is cruel, there's always a path to hope. I've left the shadows behind, and I'm moving toward a future built on honesty and justice. I'm convinced the best is still ahead. 3 months after the blow-up, my life had completely changed. I left Chicago and moved to Austin, a city I'd always liked for its calm and quality of life. Away from the noise and family tension, I could start putting my world back together. With part of my savings, I opened a small business advisory office. It wasn't the empire I'd built, but it was a fresh start, a place to use my experience and feel useful without the emotional baggage my family had piled on me. The sense of freedom was immediate. Without pressure or manipulation, each day became a chance to grow from a place of quiet and honesty. Sarah, for her part, faced the consequences without the family net. Her new job waiting tables at a modest restaurant was a hard break from the life she knew. For the first time, she faced real independence without privilege. She tried to reach me through relatives or back-channel messages, but I changed my number and blocked the rest. It wasn't vengeance. I just needed the distance to protect my peace. The old wounds still stung, but each day they hurt less, replaced by a peace I hadn't felt in years. Old friends were vital in that recovery. Their talks and steady presence reminded me that hard roads don't have to be lonely. I learned to enjoy quiet, walks, books at sunset, simple meetups, little anchors of well-being. Every day affirmed the same truth: strength and self-respect heal betrayal and disappointment. I changed through all of this. From a character in someone else's messy family script, I became the architect of my own future. Dignity restored, heart open to what's next. I realized respect and truth are non-negotiable, and any relationship built on lies is doomed. Sometimes you have to let go to move forward. Self-respect has to come first. Even when shadows linger, the future can shine, as long as it's built on honesty and integrity. Healing was slow and not without setbacks, but each step was a win over pain and betrayal. Today I can say I found inner peace and the freedom I craved, and no disloyalty will take that from me. I close this chapter knowing I chose the right path, hoping my story helps anyone facing something similar. In the end, the truest justice is the one that starts in your heart and shows up in your actions, with dignity. Life in Austin felt like a rebirth. Far from the old stages where lies and tension scripted every moment, I found a place where calm and authenticity could grow. Opening my little consulting shop was more than work. It was symbolic, a personal recovery. Each client I helped, each piece of advice I offered, reminded me of the strength and wisdom I still had, and that no betrayal could erase them. Over time, I built new friendships with people who had no preconceived notions.